Information contained on the following program off the record does not constitute specific legal advice for any real case. Off the record is presented for entertainment and general information only. Listeners are advised to consult an attorney for their specific legal questions and guidance, and not to rely solely on information presented on this or any other law program.
It's time to go off the record. Need insight on how the law works? You found the right place. Legal questions, you've found answers. Thanks for joining us. Off the record. Here's attorney Julie Jordan de Palma.
Well, happy Saturday. The sun is out again after a windy evening for most of us. And so I've decided that perhaps the winds of change have blown through enough that maybe we can talk rather than litigation and hashing out our disputes in court. I thought maybe today we'd talk about how we can resolve disputes without the typical litigation setting.
That explains the large wooden peace sign that you're wearing around your neck there today.
There you go. I should have brought it with me. Maybe it's the Volkswagen commercial that I saw last night while I was watching the Tampa Bruins game. It came on at least twice that I can
How'd that
recall.
go? What was
well,
the
they're
score?
all helping each other and working through their differences. It brought me to, let's talk about working out differences in new ways tomorrow.
Absolutely, man.
The game did not go well. To answer
sorry.
the question that you snuck in there, I am a Bruins fan. The game did not go well, and it went so poorly by way of officiating, the opinion in my house anyway. After a while, we weren't really watching it completely because certain individuals in my house couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah, my usual Friday night date with my bride, and we were at the sports bar, and I saw it on the screen, but as a matter of political expediency, I didn't pay any attention to it. I would sneak
smart.
some sidelong looks at the score from time to time. But
Probably smart. We are a Bruins house at home, so there's some sadness. There's some sadness today. It happens.
There's always next year. What can I say?
Don't say that yet.
No,
Don't say that
not
yet.
All is not
ready
lost.
to say it. All is not lost. Not ready to say it yet. And all is not lost in the disputes that we have with each other. And typically people think about attorneys as litigators and trials, and we watch TV and we see cases presented in front of juries. And today I want to talk about the other options that we have to expand people's awareness of those options so that people understand it a little better, because I think that people don't have a clear understanding of really what mediation and arbitration is, how it can help us, how it can frankly be cheaper and more cost effective a lot of times. So in order to understand what we're going to talk about today, these alternative dispute resolution forms, we need to back up a little bit and talk about court and what we all typically think of initially, which is our New York State court system. And a reminder that in New York State we have 62 counties with their own court systems. The Supreme Court is generally where most people are working out their disputes. And to remind our listeners, in New York State, the highest court is not the Supreme Court, it is our New York State Court of Appeals. So the Supreme Courts are really our courts of jurisdiction where people are going day to day to resolve these types of disputes. And what happens in Supreme Court? It's divorces and separations and annulments in New York State, but it's also those civil matters and disputes involving higher dollar amounts. What does that mean? It's about $25,000 and above is what's going to get you into Supreme Court. Business disputes, commercial disputes, etc. That's all those things that are going to happen when you file a lawsuit. When somebody says, I'm bringing a lawsuit, what does that mean? It means somebody actually drafts up the papers to sue someone and files it. And now, knock on wood, we're really doing pretty well that we can file everything electronically, which is nice. No one's walking into the county clerk's office anymore to get things stamped with a rubber stamper. We're doing a lot of things electronically. But what's happening and what a lot of people don't know is that the New York State court system here is in excess of 4 million cases per year. So you can imagine what it's like to try to efficiently deal with 4 million cases.
Just as a footnote, by the way, the jurisdictional limit of $25,000, if the dispute involves an amount less than that, does that go to like justice court or in a town? Or?
Well, there's small claims courts, right, where people can do some things. So sometimes people have issues like, for example, you go to the mechanic and you can't work out the bill or they didn't fix it properly, and those types of things can be handled in small claims. But the typical things that people get to a point where they really feel like they have to hire a lawyer and deal with an issue, it's because there's $25,000 or more in dispute. And that's not necessarily just your immediate damages. Sometimes that's other out-of-pocket expenses and related costs that ultimately can get you up and over that threshold. So that's how most people get there. Also, for our listeners, just by way of background information for people who may not have had to use the court system, we in Rochester and surrounding counties are in the 7th Judicial District of New York State. So what's that mean? What counties are included in that? It's Cayuga County, Livingston, Monroe, Ontario, Seneca, Steuben, Wayne, Yates counties.
Look at you rattling those counties off like that.
Look at that. So 7th Judicial District, that is our home for most of us and all of our listeners. But again, I want to talk today about when can it be better to avoid litigation and why. The typical case that ends up getting filed and through the court system can take anywhere from 24 to 36 months. If it's more complex than that, it can certainly take more time. Certainly if there's a quote, easier issue, could it take less? It could. But as soon as you file that action, then timeframes start to come into place for people to answer, for people to exchange documents and information in a phase that as attorneys we call discovery, for people to be taking depositions of witnesses, sitting down with people and getting their statements under oath with a stenographer who's writing everything down. All of those things take time, and guess what happens when you have multiple parties and multiple attorneys and multiple schedules? Before you know it, time is dragging on and people are getting frustrated, and even with everyone's best efforts, the process can be slow.
Yeah, there's actually a technical term for this. It's called LST, Lawyer Standard Time. And that's where everything's pretty much driven by court dockets and by time constraints imposed by the discovery process, all the procedural time frames.
Well, and to give you some examples of that, for example, in a case where you file a lawsuit, one means of obtaining discovery is to serve something called a demand for a bill of particulars. Well, what's that? That's specific questions, for example, in a personal injury lawsuit where people would say, tell us what we did that was negligent, tell us what your injuries are, tell us what your out-of-pocket expenses are, tell us how much lost time from work you've had and what your salary is. And somebody has 30 days to respond to that, plus a little bit of time, depending on how it's mailed to you. You can get a little extra time. But guess what happens most often? You might sit down with a client, there's a dispute, people clearly know what the dispute is, you might know majority of the facts, but then when you really start to get into the nitty-gritty of how much time did you lose from work, where are your W-2s, what are your out-of-pocket expenses, go print everything out, find receipts. That's harder. People don't always keep good documents. Some people do. But that process, as you might imagine, is tedious. And even if you've prepared for things and you have a good sense of it, people haven't usually dug through the boxes and the paperwork and the piles of mail on the kitchen counters to get all those things together. So before you know it, something that you had 30 days to do, people might need extensions, people might need more time. And already you can see how this time frame keeps getting pushed out. And guess what happens? Everybody's also paying for that in most cases. So while I do personal injury law, I don't get paid until someone is successful at the end of a case. There are a lot of cases where individuals are paying by the hour for attorneys to be looking through documents and creating these responses. And so things quickly get expensive. And so in this day and age where there's 4 million cases in a court system and people have these disputes and you have a sense of how long it can take and how expensive it can be, and then you add on top of that something called standards and goals, which judges have over them, which are really beginning to be emphasized more and more because there are so many cases. You have this issue where sometimes those timeframes are getting truncated, or judges are really adamant that people stick to those time frames, And there's good and bad to that. The good is, yes, let's all be more efficient. The bad is people sometimes do need more time. And when people can have a meeting of the minds and take a pause, that's usually a good thing. And it's difficult right now with how many cases there are to try to navigate both being efficient but not rushing, giving people time to pause but keeping the case moving through the docket. And it's not ideal.
Standards and goals, I gather, is an attempt to try to prevent abuse of the judicial process, the trial process.
Yeah, I mean, what it really is an attempt to keep the parties moving because, as you might imagine, with schedules and people and documents and different things that come about, people are regularly asking for extensions. They're regularly asking to take what judges can issue early on in the case, which is called a scheduling order that sets deadlines for people to get these things done. And a lot of times there's requests for extension. Certainly if there's good cause for it, people should get it, and they do. And other times, I think over the years, certainly we can all think of examples where that has really been abused, where people just aren't focusing in on certain issues or communicating well with clients, or clients are dragging their feet too at times, and before you know it, everything's dragging.
And the discovery process, by the way, is meant to obviate the courtroom drama that you typically see depicted in TV and movies, where you've got this deadlocked case and the tension is mounting, and all of a sudden somebody comes through the back doors of the courtroom waving some document, some extremely dispositive piece of evidence that completely solves whatever the case is and resolves it to everyone's satisfaction.
The worst thing that ever happened to litigation are all of the TV shows where people think that scenario happens, or that, for example, DNA evidence should be in, just about every case. People start to say, where's the DNA evidence? It makes people crazy. And people think that trial is going to be very exciting, and people are going to ask these Matlock questions, and somebody's going to scream out, you can't handle the truth. And not so much, folks.
And justice for all.
And justice for all, which certainly I think we can all think, and people who have been through the process have certainly had their moments where they walk out of the courtroom and they certainly don't feel like it's been justice for all. Sometimes they do, and sometimes there's good days, but it's not nearly as exciting as it appears on TV. It is much more tedious than that in real life.
Jeffrey Tambor never shows up and throws dishes.
It's weird.
It just doesn't. I've never seen that.
It doesn't happen. Jurors don't scream things out from the box. Witnesses don't generally scream things out or run out. I'm sure there are good war stories that attorneys out there could tell about things that have happened that are a little more exciting, but it is not TV. And a lot of times people are bringing cases and they're hoping for that moment where the music is in the background and it feels like justice has been served and they've been able to say everything that they wanted to get off their chest and get out there in the open and have decided. And then those pesky things like rules of evidence and whether those statements really exist in documents so these things can be proven, that all of a sudden gets in the way. And it's not anything like those movies we all watch.
Sometimes people are surprised at how their case unfolds in court if they ever get to the litigation stage, and they have their story that they want told and they have the points that they want to make, and lots of times is it not true that your side of the story winds up sounding like the 1812 overture played on a kazoo? You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like it's
you got me at kazoo.
The point gets across, but it's like but that's not but. That's not what I wanted people to understand.
Yeah, in the kindest possible way. The things that are so incredibly important to parties on either side, to your point of the 1812 overture on kazoo, are certainly far drier to the average person on a civil jury.
Less dramatic.
Sitting in the box with 6 friends, or 8 total if the alternates are sitting through too. It is not TV, and candidly trying to keep your jurors awake while you present these stories that people think are riveting because it's affecting their personal lives. 1812 overture on a kazoo while I do a little soft shoe dance to keep them awake and try to make it exciting. So it's not always the best scenario.
And by the way, that's not a reference to Richard Gere in Chicago either. She literally does not tap dance in front of the jury. That I know.
In my spare time.
That I know.
My spare time while I teach my daughter.
Julie Jordan DePalma, Off the Record on WYSL. We'll be back. By the way, we have thematic bump music as we talk about mediation today. We have Why Can't We All Get Along music on WYSL.
I knew a man that I did not care for, and then one day this man gave me a call. We sat and talked about things on our mind, and now this man, he is a friend of mine.
Great Chevy lease deals are blooming at Victor Chevrolet. Get there for best selection and find new roads. For a limited time, 24-month lease. A 2018 Equinox LT, just $159 a month. Must have current non-GM lease in household. MSRP $31,440. Residual $21,379. Or check great pickup values at Victor Chevrolet. An 18 Silverado pickup LT, just $189 a month for 36 months. Double cab with remote start and trailering package. Heated front seats and dual zone climate control. MSRP $43,670. Residual $21,379. Must have GM lease in household while Flex cash funds are available. Or an 18 Colorado extended cab 4-wheel drive pickup, just $139 a month for 24 months, including keyless remote entry and towing package. MSRP $31,925. Residual $22,986. Must have current lease in household. $2,500 cash or trade on all deals. Plus first payment tax, acquisition, and DMV fees due at signing. Don't miss these incredible deals this week only. If your budget's tight, check out Victor's incredible selection of great used cars, SUVs, and pickups. Make it Victor Chevrolet, Route 96 in Victor. Visit victorchevrolet.com.
At University Eye Specialists, I see many patients who suffer from dry, irritated, or itchy eyes. Sometimes these symptoms are often due to severe dry eye. Over-the-counter eye drops often help, but sometimes dry eye may require treatment with prescription medication. Dry eye is a very treatable medical condition that should be taken very seriously. The health of your eyes is very important to us. Please feel free to call any one of our local offices for an appointment.
In America, we are living longer, healthier lives. The longer we live, the more likely we are to develop eye conditions such as glaucoma, macular degeneration, and diabetic eye disease. If you are over the age of 40, it's important to have a thorough eye examination in order to identify vision-threatening conditions at an early stage. At University Eye, we have the technology and experience to screen for and to treat glaucoma, macular degeneration, and diabetic retinopathy. At University Eye, your vision is our mission.
Phone 1-800-724-0938.
Suffering a serious injury because of medical malpractice, nursing home neglect, dangerous conditions on property, or a car accident can make your life feel like it stands still. How will you provide for your family and overcome this loss? I'm Julie Jordan DePalma. I'm a trial attorney, but I'm also the daughter of someone who suffered a disabling injury. When you need someone to provide compassionate guidance to your family, but be a fearless advocate to your opponent, call the law offices of Jordan DePalma at 585-673-3053.
A healthy smile has general health benefits beyond just teeth. It's whole body wellness. Don't live with broken, missing, or failing teeth. Lakeview Dental can restore your smile with state-of-the-art dental care. And if you've been afraid to go to the dentist, those days are gone, thanks to safe, fear-free sedation dentistry. Find out more at livoniasmiles.com or call 346-3028. Lakeview Dental, for the smile of a healthier you.
You're listening to Off the Record with Julie Jordan DePalma on WYSL 92.1 FM at 1040 AM.
I'm having a moment to listen to our break music about getting along. What do we have here?
Makes the
Love does make the world go round.
Deion Jackson.
I like it. I like it. We're teaching everybody light and love today is what we're talking about, believe it or not. On the legal show, where most people want to dispute things in court, we're going to try to tell people how to get along. Do you think that there's attorneys and judges laughing in the background somewhere as we do this show?
I think so. Let's hope we put a smile on someone's face.
I hope so. I want to go back to the 1812 overture on kazoo that you brought up earlier, because it brings up an important point that will carry us into why sometimes mediation and arbitration is better, which is this. No matter how good your trial attorney is that you bring into trial with you, and there are a lot of very talented people, because it is very much a performance in terms of taking the facts and the law and bringing them together in a way to do everything you possibly can to make it more exciting than the 1812 Overture on kazoo. But one thing that I want to emphasize today is, and people lose sight of this, this is the most important case to you. There is a lot of emotion behind whatever dispute has brought you here. In addition to emotion about whatever the dispute is between you and the other party, there's all the other emotions that come into it in terms of how your life has changed, what's happened with expenses or money you've lost, and how that's affected the rest of your life. And in the politest possible way, those huge emotions that you may have get to a point where parties can be irrational about the conversation of, okay, yes, all of those things did happen, and yes, someone may be wrong or made the mistake or they were negligent, but now we have to move past that. We've got to try to find some common ground where we compromise and we make sure that the person that may have made the mistake is accountable. We make sure the person that was damaged is compensated in some way, but there is never going to be there's never going to be that moment where somebody sits back and says, everything is right now. It's not going to happen. Our system is not perfect. A lot of times people say, I'll tell you, I could probably retire at this point if the people that came through my office and said, if someone had just said they were sorry and acknowledged what they did, we wouldn't be here. And yet, when we get through a litigation process, and attorneys on both sides will tell you these stories, where people say, if they had just said they were sorry, if they just paid me back what I was owed, we could all move forward. And you'll be shocked to know that when we get to that point where we start to discuss it and somebody says the sorry, or they pay back that amount that was owed, what happens on the other side?
And one more thing.
It's not enough. Followed by, you don't understand what we've been through. And what I want to emphasize to people is, I do understand. Yeah. And all the attorneys understand.
And it doesn't matter.
But the system can't compensate for that,
it's
right?
It's not what it's there for.
It's not what it's there for. And I think people need to acknowledge that, because they get very frustrated when they start to be brought into the system, right? When you have 4 million cases and you are litigating things and your judge gets assigned and attorneys are going to conferences, the parties aren't even there 90% of the time. And if the parties come into a settlement conference, it's usually because the judge can sense that someone is being somewhat unreasonable about their position, and the judge is attempting to help the parties get reasonable so things can move forward in some fashion. But what's upsetting to people is they get in their head these other intangible items that can't be compensated for, that can't be dealt with basic litigation. And then you couple that with, what do you mean I'm never going to see the judge or talk to the judge? Or doesn't the judge need to know that? Or how's the judge going to find out? And the system is limited. The system is for information gathering so the attorneys can properly represent people. But the system is not for airing grievances in the typical fashion that most people think, I need to get this off my chest. I need to air this issue. It's just not what it's designed to do, or how practically things are going to come about.
It's kind of a misnomer. Lots of times there's a term that gets bandied about making you whole. Practically speaking, you're not really made whole. I mean, you get part of the way there. But I mean, if for no other cost or no other reason than the cost of the attorney, the cost of the litigation.
Correct.
That's going to be, except in pretty extraordinary circumstances, that's going to come out of your pocket.
It's going to come out of the pocket, and it's going to come out of a recovery, which is why it's so important for people to have realistic expectations and to question their attorneys about what can be accomplished, and also to be honest with their attorneys about what their goals are. I try to ask people that right off the bat, because what I like people to know is, here's what I can actually accomplish for you, and here's what I can't. I can't make you whole in the sense that I can't get rid of the emotional toll that this whole process has taken. What I can tell you is it's going to take more to continue to go through the system. And people need to, I think, balance and kind of have these reality checks at different points in time where people are told, this is how much it's going to cost you to, quote, air those grievances or have depositions with recorded statements or get through motions or do other things to march towards trial. It is very expensive and time consuming. And to your point, it's coming out of your pocket at some point in the process. So let's talk about mediation and arbitration as another means, because it can be faster, it can be cheaper. And if your point is really to have the appropriate goal to be made whole, which from my perspective and for purposes of today's show is about how do we get distilled down the most important facts so both sides have a good sense of what are the universe of facts for this dispute. So we all know what we're working with. We can evaluate the relative strengths and weaknesses so we can cut to the chase, which is how do we fix it? And mediation and arbitration can be one way to do it. So first, let's start with the arbitration concept. Have you ever had to go to an arbitration? Have you ever heard stories of arbitration?
I've never participated in one. I've seen the results, and, great when it works. Sometimes it doesn't work.
Great when it works, and I'm sure that there are people out there who would say really bad when it doesn't. And there are different ways to do it. So oftentimes when you do an arbitration, there may be a panel of arbitrators, which are chosen by the attorneys. Sometimes each side picks one, and then there's a neutral that comes in. So there's a panel of 3. You can do binding arbitration. So a decision comes out and all the parties agree, whatever this decision is what we will all live with. Sometimes that's nerve-wracking to people because they think, well, if I wanted that to happen, I would just go to court and let the judge and the jury do it, and that's not what I wanted to do. That's one method of doing it. There's also things that are important to know. Some cases can only be handled by arbitration, right? We've certainly heard the news stories about forced arbitration clauses, whether they are okay, whether they're not okay. But there are times when parties agree that if a dispute arises, they want to do it through arbitration. So that is one means of doing it. And arbitration, for general discussion today, I kind of will like to describe as litigation light, okay? Because you can do arbitration much like litigation. In other words, you can go through depositions of parties. You can have arbitrators set schedules for you of when you are exchanging documents or position statements, and who can kind of serve almost in the capacity of a judge to keep the process moving, to keep people efficient. You can also, once you actually get into the arbitration, while you might exchange position statements before that time, you will also have a true arbitration. What's that mean? You're not going to show up in a courtroom. A lot of times you're going to show up in a different room set for that purpose, or a conference room of somebody's office if that's what you so choose. And the parties can present information, just like you would do at a trial. You can bring witnesses in to speak in front of the arbitrators. You can agree between both sides about the universe of documents that will be shown to the arbitrators.
Same evidence rules and all that would obtain in a trial, right?
Well, believe it or not, no.
Really?
Well, the rules of evidence really are not the same. A lot of times the rules of evidence generally don't apply. The sides can decide between each other which documents you're going to use and what's going to come in, and witnesses can sit down and, for the most part, have more ability to present information, sides of their story. For example, the rules about hearsay that apply at trial and in court certainly really generally don't apply in an arbitration. In other words, if somebody says, I heard this other person say X, Y, and Z, whereas in court you would have to have exceptions for that and be able to explain some reason why the information is admissible. You generally don't in an arbitration. And some people like that because that's the piece where people say, but I got to tell my side of the story.
But how do you keep everything in but the kitchen sink from getting thrown in?
Well, that's where arbitrators can come in and rules about your position statements, having the parties on both sides agree to what documents are going to be used. Arbitrators can steer folks into making sure that this doesn't become everything in the kitchen sink. Sometimes you can get rulings on what's going to be covered and what's not. Sometimes
Who rules if there's no judge?
Well, there's arbitrators.
The panel?
There are arbitrators who can help steer the parties in the right direction to be efficient on witnesses and documents and how things are going to be handled. For example...
Well, the global question I have, I mean, before we're going to break here, but how do we make sure this process is fair and not a free-for-all?
I am pausing because people like to throw the word fair around, and everyone has a different definition of fair.
Yeah.
My daughter at 6's definition of fair, my son's definition of fair at 14, my husband's definition of fairness in light of some of the officiating in the hockey game last night.
Yeah.
There's a spectrum of what we call fair, right? So we'll discuss fair when we come back and how people determine things are fair to both sides in arbitration and mediation when we get back.
Off the record, Julie Jordan DePalma of the Jordan DePalma Law Firm here on WYSL. Thanks so much for joining us. Get the podcast, by the way, at WYSL1040.com. That's not hearsay. You can ask me any question you want right now about it. We'll be right back.
But there is no easy way around it. Light of the world, shine on me. Love is the answer.
Insulation. It's a smart idea since it keeps wind from whistling right through your windows, summer heat from your attic from baking you alive, or cold floors in the winter from turning your toes blue. And maybe you know that Icynene foam insulation is the best smart idea since it gets into spaces other insulations can't touch. Icynene fills small openings and gaps in your walls and around windows and doors that add up to big heating and cooling savings, as much as 50%. But the experts at Birch Lumber and Building Supplies in Perry want to remind you, no matter how great the material, only proper installation assures you that your Icynene insulation will give you the ultimate in comfort and energy savings. You can always identify a Birch insulation customer, from their comfortable smile to the extra money they enjoy every day from utility savings. Don't trust your insulation project to any here today, gone tomorrow guy with a pickup truck and a sprayer. Call Birch Lumber and Building Supply, Washington Boulevard in Perry, 237-6128. Do it today and start saving.
Suffering a serious injury because of medical malpractice, nursing home neglect, dangerous conditions on property, or a car accident can make your life feel like it stands still. How will you provide for your family and overcome this loss? I'm Julie Jordan DePalma. I'm a trial attorney, but I'm also the daughter of someone who suffered a disabling injury. When you need someone to provide compassionate guidance to your family, but be a fearless advocate to your opponent, call the law offices of Jordan DePalma at 585-673-3053.
Eisen Rochester is a full-service ophthalmology office, and we specialize in general ophthalmology, taking care of people from childhood to adult and seniors. We do general eye exams. We specialize in cataract surgery, corneal surgery, and disease, as well as LASIK surgery. We also have a full-service optical shop and contact lens fitting service.
Visit Eisen Rochester at 1157 Fairport Road.
At Family Furniture in Perry, get everyday savings without big chain store hassles. Find out why Family Furniture is the shopping destination for thousands all over the region. Need a new mattress? Come in and try their all-new Echo Gel infused memory foam, or the solid latex styles for the finest support and comfort available today. Instead of the big Rochester showrooms, shop Family Furniture in downtown Perry, serving you for over 65 years. Open Thursday and Friday nights till 7, Saturdays till 4.
At Finger Lakes Gaming and Racetrack, making you feel like a top dog is what we do. Try your luck on our 1,500 video gaming machines and enjoy Finger Lakes Gaming's award-winning Vineyard Buffet. Or watch your favorite team on the big screen at Remedy Bar and Lounge. Hey, when's the last time you felt like a top dog? Go fetch that feeling at Finger Lakes Gaming and Racetrack, Route 96 in Farmington. And check us out at fingerlakesgaming.com. Must be 18 to play video gaming machines.
We're keeping it legal with Julie Jordan DePalma on WYSL 92.1 FM and News Power 1040 AM.
Julie Jordan DePalma.
I'd like to build the world.
Why can't we all just get along?
It's the emotional piece. It's all too close to our hearts, our emotions, and in most cases, it has changed our lives and our financial circumstances such that it's hard to see beyond what's going on.
I'm going to teach him a thing or two.
Reasonable. Yes. So before we left, you asked me
Fairness.
a question.
How do we keep the process fair?
That sends chills up my spine, which is, how is that fair? How do we make sure it's fair? And our generic concepts of fairness, I think, have to be reevaluated with what are the limitations of our system, what can we reasonably accomplish, and what are we here to do. So, generally speaking, and I'm talking more in the context of the business type disputes or the corporate disputes, or where we're really just talking about money pieces, where people say, well, how is that fair? And what about this cost? And a lot of time with the business pieces, we start to get into, well, but this is my reputation versus their reputation. And those issues of fairness or how people will be seen or what their reputations are not the focuses of being able to get through the system. The system is about evaluating the facts in front of you, comparing it to the law and what the law allows, and then trying to compensate people, because that's what our system can do. It can compensate. And when we say make whole, we really mean compensate. And so people need to know that right off the bat. For example, some people say, well, aren't they going to be punished, or aren't they going to be admonished, or isn't their business going to be told they can't practice business in a certain way? And generally speaking, the answer to that is no. Money is going to change hands, and that may or may not be sufficient to people to say fairness has been achieved. It's really about the basics of how can you be compensated for these things, and there may be businesses or people or individuals who you still consider to be bad people or bad businesses, but as a general purpose, nobody's going to go to jail probably after your civil case is done because of what happened. Nobody's probably going to be put out of business because people have insurance. Nobody is going to kind of get the scarlet letter, so to speak, to let everybody know how somebody is doing things. It's just, for the most part, it's not going to happen. So people need to understand that the goal is compensation. It's not a lot of these other side issues that people can become very ingrained and concerned about. So you need to know that going in. I think as soon as people understand that and really accept it, then you can move forward much faster.
And your sense is that mediation and arbitration is a better way to get that done?
A lot of times I think that you can cut to the information faster if people agree to try to mediate cases. And here's the reason for it. When there's 4 million cases in the system and you are going through the motions, so to speak, with your attorney, you're getting through depositions, maybe you're making motions to get certain rulings on how the law will affect each side's positions. Those things can be helpful to kind of highlighting the important pieces or honing in on what's most important or directing parties to become more realistic about their positions. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you're still going to have to figure out, how do we make somebody whole and how do we divide up money if that's what's here? And even in a personal injury case, it's money to compensate you for your loss. How are we going to figure that out? And how are we going to get people focused? And what people don't understand is in the court system, with so many cases and judges, with all they have on their plates, they have minimal time to try to help the parties figure that out. A lot of judges will try, but even so, they may only have a half an hour to talk about people and their cases and where people are at. And that's not enough time to drill down and make significant achievements, unless people have done so much work out on the outside that we're at the final straw here. We're on the courthouse steps, and maybe there's that little last piece that a judge can help us with. So I think that mediation in particular can be very beneficial for people and something that they should consider, because when you go to trial, we watch movies and we hear stories about how we're going to pick our jury. And guess what? You're not picking your jury. You are doing your best. Your attorney is doing your best with strikes and challenges they have to eliminate people out of that box, to pull kind of worst case scenario opinions and thoughts out of that box for you. But they are most certainly not picking what would be best for you, nor is the other side. It doesn't happen that way.
It's kind of a form of kind of a rough, fuzzy version of risk management.
I
guess probably the best way of putting it.
I would absolutely say that picking a jury is managing risk. And you don't have a lot of control over what time of the year necessarily your case gets on a trial calendar. Judges in most counties are 12 months and 18 months out from trial from the time you say, I'm ready to go.
Wow.
So you may say you're ready to go at one time of the year, for example, and somebody may say, great, come on down in June. Well, guess what? You come on down in June, and as you can imagine, there's a lot of college students who are back and about to sit on your jury. And absolutely no offense to the college students, but if you are in a case that has a high level of sophistication of business issues, or a complex issue, and your entire box may be filled with people who have never run a business, or who have never had to manage their own checking account, or who don't have the experience or the understanding or the background information to follow along with what you're saying. And now that's who's going to decide what happens with your case. So a positive about mediation is sometimes parties are just far more comfortable with the fact that they can choose who that neutral person is. The attorneys can look at backgrounds. You can choose an individual who may have worked in that field, been an attorney doing those cases for many, many years. They understand the ins and outs. They can follow the arguments. They know the law. They can carefully look over the information. So you can have an intelligently driven conversation about the issues. That is a very positive aspect about it, because what people don't necessarily understand about trial is the jury is the fact finder. What's that mean? Those individuals in the box are going to make the decision. The judge isn't going to be making the ultimate decision from the bench if your jury is there. The jury is deciding, and the judge is going to instruct the jury on the law and answer questions and guide them, but ultimately that jury is going to be making the decision. So I do think that there are specific types of cases that can be dealt with far more efficiently, and where you can manage your risk by choosing that neutral person who may be far more attuned to having an appropriate conversation with you about your case and getting down to brass tacks.
So a question about the time element. Is it more expedient time-wise to go the mediation route? Or is that not really a factor?
I think it can be. In other words, I think that if you, for example, in a case where there is a strong liability question that, for the most part, the parties all understand. In other words, perhaps the defendant says, look, we acknowledge we made a mistake here. There's an issue. We don't necessarily want this to be out in public in front of a jury and out in the press. So the confidentiality piece of mediation can be very attractive to people. But also in that kind of scenario, what people can do is say, look, let's all exchange the documents we know we need to exchange so we can best understand this, and then let's sit down and let's figure it out, because it's in everybody's best interest. It's going to cost less money, it's going to be faster, and we're going to get to the information easier. So sometimes Sometimes you'll do depositions anyway. Other times you can move forward with that mediation even without depositions of all the parties. Sometimes that's attractive because sometimes there are individuals on one side or another who would prefer not to have sworn statements out there about a case, who would prefer to be discussing their positions through their attorneys and with a mediator.
With mediation, is there a record?
There isn't a record of mediation as people would think of a record in a trial where there are transcripts and everything is typed out. For example, if you do a mediation and you pick that neutral third party, and you really should be prepared to spend a full day at least in a mediation to do it right and to talk through those issues. But what's really happening is your attorney might be taking notes, the attorney on the other side is taking notes, mediator is probably taking notes so that they can follow along in the conversations and offers and counteroffers of money, but no one's writing a transcript. No one walks out with a transcript of it. The only record of a mediation, so to speak, is that most often times what will happen is at the end, the agreement, if one has been reached, will be memorialized enough that somebody, for example, can't walk out of the room and go, oh, no, that's not what I said, and everything falls apart. It actually gets memorialized that there has, in fact, been an agreement in principle in the following fashion, and everybody signs it before they walk out. So they can count on it afterwards. But otherwise, there's not a record as you're probably thinking about it.
We're talking mediation and arbitration on Off the Record today with attorney Julie Jordan DePalma, and we'll be back after this break.
It seems anyone can build a website these days using all sorts of free tools and services. But do those websites actually get results? And how do you even measure it? Nothing But Net Solutions knows there's so much more to an online presence today. Websites are just one piece of the puzzle. Search engine optimization, pay-per-click campaigns, email campaigns, social media, mobile readiness, and responsive design, plus analytics are all part of it. Nothing But Net Solutions will affordably simplify the choices for you, providing a wide range of internet development and marketing services, all under one umbrella, customized to each situation. Nothing But Net Solutions will be there with you through every step, concerned about only one thing: results. 14 years in business and counting. That's what they really care about. Visit nbnsolutions.com or call 585-298-9510. That's 585-298-9510.
If you're looking to market and grow your business, make new business connections, and give back to the community in a meaningful way, consider joining the Greece Regional Chamber of Commerce. We're the largest suburban chamber in Monroe County, and we offer networking, education, marketing, insurance, and advocacy. You do not need to live or work in Greece to join. Our members come from throughout the region. In short, we're better together, and together, we're moving business forward. Visit greecechamber.org or call 585-227-7272 to join today.
Suffering a serious injury because of medical malpractice, nursing home neglect, dangerous conditions on property, or a car accident can make your life feel like it stands still. How will you provide for your family and overcome this loss? I'm Julie Jordan DePalma. I'm a trial attorney, but I'm also the daughter of someone who suffered a disabling injury. When you need someone to provide compassionate guidance to your family, but be a fearless advocate to your opponent, call the law offices of Jordan DePalma at 585-673-3053.
For breaking news.
Right now, a police investigation is underway in this city.
Police are still working to determine exactly what happened here tonight.
For weather where you live.
A nice chance for some sunshine. Travel overnight into tomorrow will be challenging.
For investigative reports.
We're about to show you the most unique crime prevention story we've ever done.
Who's going to know more about breaking into homes than the people who actually did it?
Watch News 10 NBC. It's where WYSL listeners get their news. Julie Jordan DePalma's Off the Record on WYSL 92.1 FM and 1040 AM. Online at WYSL1040.com.
Which is where you will also find the podcast, WYSL1040.com. Julie Jordan DePalma is always on the radio. I'm surprised she's not more tired than she is.
I'm here, I'm always on, and I'm always happy to talk with everybody. And today we decided to talk about how can we get along, how can we resolve disputes without litigation, and so we're talking about mediation now. We've moved on to how can neutral mediators be someone who can help us efficiently move through disputes. And mediators typically are attorneys themselves who are either still practicing, some have retired from practice. Sometimes they're retired judges who have really great information on how cases come through and values of cases and how things typically shake out, and they can help the parties get very reasonable faster. So let's talk a little bit about the nitty-gritty of a mediation. How does it work? Generally speaking, the attorneys will work with their clients and review potential mediators who can help and make a decision on who can best look at the issue. And a lot of times that may be finding somebody who has particular experience with your type of dispute. In other words, if you have a complex commercial case or a business dispute, you want someone who has done that type of litigation or who has experience with it, because everything is going to be more efficient and you're going to have someone that is more knowledgeable to follow along with your conversation. Similarly, for example, if you're doing a medical malpractice case, you're going to want someone who has either heard those cases before or prosecuted or defended those cases so they can follow along with those conversations. Usually speaking, if parties agree to do mediation and go to mediation, what they also agree to do is split the cost of the mediation. So each party has some skin in the game before they even walk through the door. And that's an important piece of it because it's important to prepare, to have your information. Generally, the attorneys are creating position statements to put your very best foot forward so that you can have those conversations with the mediator. The mediator knows something about the case before you sit down. But then once you get there, you are going to have to be somewhat patient, and you have to be prepared to get there mentally, in that you have to be prepared to resolve the case. You have to walk in the door saying, I know I'm going to have to compromise a little bit, and so are they, but I'm ready to do that.
So that's the goal. The goal is to resolve the case.
The goal, once people agree to mediation, you need to do it in good faith. And what do I mean by that? You need to be emotionally and mentally prepared to compromise to resolve it. And what a case is worth, and you'll hear this time and time again, what a case is worth is what one side is willing to pay and the other side is willing to accept. And you do a mediation to narrow the gap. What do I mean by that? One side says I want $1 million, the other side says I'm going to pay $200,000. There's a gap there. Sometimes people will say we're way too far apart. We can't go to mediation because we're too far apart. And what I would say is at times mediation can be the best way to get people closer together, because now there is a neutral person who looks through the facts and the evidence, who speaks with both parties, who starts to understand what is important to each side and starts to bring people together. And a lot of times they can do that by saying, they can really call out the relative strengths and weaknesses of each side to say, yes, I hear you that this person made a mistake, but did you know that the jury verdict research or the typical course of events, if you were to take this to trial, says that maybe you're only going to be successful on that point 50% of the time. And sometimes parties need to hear that from someone other than their own attorney to be able to better participate in that compromise process. And unlike most of the court settlement conferences where just the attorneys are present, when there's a mediation, the parties are present. They are there to actively participate, hear each side, and hear how each side sounds when it gets presented. And sometimes when you actually see how the side is going to get presented with the evidence that's available, it changes people's perspective enough to compromise.
So are the parties actively represented by an attorney during the process?
Yes. So mediation, you are represented by your attorney. Your attorney is there, and for the most part, the attorney is speaking on your behalf. But good mediators will generally break up a day between individual sessions and joint sessions. So, for example, a mediator may start the day with bringing everybody in one room, introducing themselves, giving some background, giving each side an opportunity to give, for example, an opening statement or make opening comments. Some of the best mediations I've been to, frankly, were where that joint session was simply to introduce everybody and to have that almost that moment that everybody was waiting for, where each side looks at the other and says, I'm thankful that we're here today. Just so you know, we're here because we want to try to get this resolved. And we intend to work hard today to make that happen.
Thus establishing good faith.
Thus establishing good faith, and literally sometimes hearing kind of the principle of a company or a defendant to a claimant and vice versa changes the whole dynamic. The claimant wanted to kind of hear someone say, I'm sorry, we take accountability. And the other side wanted to hear a claimant say, I'm ready to be reasonable.
Right.
And sometimes that breaks the ice by itself. And then generally what happens is you break up into these individual sessions where each side with their attorney kind of gets their own private room and the mediator is running back and forth to speak with everybody. And you can use that opportunity to have candid and confidential conversations with the mediator. Sometimes you can say, I'm ready for you to share this information with the other side, or I'm not. Sometimes you say, this is really where we are, and a mediator can try to help you get there without giving out all the information all at once. But the mediator is there to try to bring people closer together, to find where is that break-even compromise point where compromise is just that. What's it mean? Everybody walks away a little disappointed. No one's going to get everything, but that's what has to happen in order for a case to resolve. And although some people might be out there thinking, well, that sounds terrible. Why would I do that? Well, the reason you would do it is because you can go to litigation and you can pay even more money and take even longer and maybe not get a result even as good as your compromise point.
I'm going to use the F word here that always makes Julie Jordan De Palma cringe.
Here we go.
When we're talking the old joke about a fair outcome of any kind of dispute is if both sides hate it, it's probably fair.
It's right. That really is it. If everybody walks away just a little disappointed, that's probably correct, because that means one side has maybe had to come down a little bit from a place that maybe was not reasonable. Somebody else had to pay a little more because maybe their side wasn't as reasonable in getting to a number that was, quote, fair. So the mediator can really be that neutral person that starts to neutralize the emotions, neutralize people being dug into certain positions on the law, and start to see that common ground. And what I will tell people is mediation is not quick. So is it the same as a trial where you could be there a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, 8 hours a day? No. But should you expect that you're going to walk into a mediation and in a couple hours be done? Definitely not. You should expect to spend a full day there. And then a lot of times, can you resolve it in a full day? Yes. Sometimes you can, most times you can, but other times it takes another session, or it takes some phone calls from the mediator on the outside. And people should be willing to do that and not disappointed if that has to happen. You have to put the work in. But I think it's an important consideration for people to think about and talk about if they are involved in lawsuits. It's another means for people to resolve disputes when they get to that point where they think, why is this taking so long and it's just so expensive? What else can we do? It doesn't seem fair that it's taking this long. And one of your options that you can consider and you should consider is mediation.
All right. In our final moments here, why don't you give them some contact information if they have questions about mediation, arbitration, or any legal issue?
Absolutely. So my name is Julie Jordan De Palma, and I am with the law offices of Jordan De Palma. I can be reached at 585-673-3053 or by email at jjd@jordandepalma.com. And I always welcome your comments, your questions, or your ideas for shows.
All right. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time on Off the Record.